Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Pakistan EdTech Summit 2021. This is one of the most awaited panel discussions, and the moderator and the speakers are all here. Let's talk about raising capital for EdTech. Over to you, Mr. Zeshan Afzal. Sir, you're live.
Thank you, Anza. Thank you, Anza. It's really good to be here amongst this amazing panel today. It's going to be very exciting. One of the exciting topics that I like, education, and some amazing faces from Pakistan, Faraz, Misbah, Faisal, and Salman. Especially Misbah, who's I think already invested in one of the EdTechs in Pakistan. Welcome, everyone. It's good to have all of you, some familiar faces, seeing Faisal after such a long time. And would like to congratulate the CXO Global Forum team to putting up this panel, first of all, and doing this amazing stuff. EdTech. All right. So education technology. Just to give you a little few stats about education technology globally. The education industry globally is a $1.4 trillion market every year and growing like multiple folds. Globally, there are 15 unicorns who are almost like, right, and more than $5 billion. And out of these 15 unicorns, 7 are in US, around 5 are in China, 2 are in India, and 1 is in Canada. Having said that, Pakistan is amongst the 10 most populous countries in the world. And with Pakistan's youth population, as per UNDP, 64%. So out of the last census, the 220 million population, Pakistan's 64% is 30 years and less, which comes to 140 million. And in Pakistan, we hardly see any education startups coming up. People trying to do education, EdTech startups. So I would like to first start with the panelists that what do you think the potential of education technology for Pakistan specifically? And before we go to how to raise capital, I would like to, for the audience to understand the potential in Pakistan for EdTech, especially with 64% of, youth population, 30 years and less, and Pakistan amongst the top 10 countries in the world, and hardly any significant EdTech companies coming up except for few which came last year. So starting with Faraz, Faraz, what do you think? How do you see the potential of EdTech in Pakistan?
Thank you, Zeshan, for setting the scene, and hello to the fellow panelists. All of them are definitely much more accomplished. I would like to just kind of set the scene from and differentiate between the global need of EdTechs vis-a-vis Pakistani need. I mean, you have explained it very well. I mean, the need for a fantastic EdTech startup in Pakistan and potential as well because of the population, because the lack of education, because of the education system that is still suffering from colonial hangover, and this pandemic that has actually allowed us to kind of look at these EdTech models that can actually deliver super quality education at a cost-effective price for the masses. Now, in the West or the developed economies, if you see, the need is of a different nature. Probably 10 years down the road, the needs would merge. But if 10 years ago, if I would go and do a master's, or actually in my case, 20 years ago, there is a particular method, which is like university dhundni padegi hame. We have to find a university fee that is set. The teachers, the professors set, the courses that the university prescribes set, the timings set. Now, that was a totally educational institution driven formula, which has changed in the West and changing rapidly. Today, if my daughter is going to go and do a master's, we are actually exploring that she's going to do 5 different courses digitally from 5 different universities, from the professors that she wants to get it at a price, at the time, and at the size of the learning of her choice. So the whole paradigm has shifted from the supplier, which is university, to the consumer. And that is phenomenal. I went last year to the University of Punjab and we spoke about a similar kind of a thing. I think this is going to become everyday kind of a thing in coming 10, 15, 20 years, perhaps not, because we still like a brand name, we still like a particular setting and, as a nation. But the universities are worried now. And I'll tell you why universities. A very dear friend of mine have been hired by a major Ivy League university to do what? Basically, to reallocate the infrastructure that is costing them millions and actually, in certain cases, billions to maintain. They don't know what to do now. And our universities are like their infrastructure is really spread out. University of Punjab, LUMS, IBA, you take it any university. So ultimately, there would be a need in which these universities would need to come towards EdTech as well, because the delivery mechanism and the cost of delivery would be so low that, that the masses would like to go towards them. So Pakistan is just the hotbed for, but the needs would be different. The needs of how the tech industry is growing in the West is going to be different vis-a-vis Pakistan.
Okay, so thank you, Faraz, for very insightful comments, and you're talking about the local, potential that is there. And I'm going to quickly pick up, Brain, because he has been involved in the university setup. He was there as a director alum, handling startups, and then in the education system as well. Bricks and Mortar Physical Institute, one of the leading prime institutes of Pakistan, and that shift for our people and our students. So I'll come to one of your points when you said West and Pakistan, because technology and with the availability of this Wi-Fi network across Pakistan is a big challenge. So Faisal, what do you think? Being there, done it, advisor to many organizations, what is the potential of education in Pakistan, especially relating to technology?
All right, thanks, Zeshan. So you gave us some figures, right, on the global scale. So in Pakistan, because I, interestingly enough, am actually right now co-founder of an EdTech, and this is the direction I was leading into. Right. So to start with, Pakistan's education market currently is valued around, it's estimated around 16 billion plus. I say plus because there's a huge underbelly that nobody measures. Right, the academies, the tuition institutes, right, the individual tuition and all that is not measured, right? So that's again estimated another 5 to 7 billion. So it's a pretty big market. It's a very populous country and it's a very young market, right? So the age group is very low. Now I was
correct me if I'm wrong. When you're talking about the 16 billion, is it PKR or the dollars? I want because
dollars. 16 billion dollars, not PKR. I thought, because you mentioned the figures in global, so I thought the assumption is that dollars everybody would know. No, $16 billion is just one school system. Rupees is just one school system. So having looked at it, and currently I'm involved with a program at the federal level, which is the Kamyab Jawan Skills for All program, right? And we've given out 170 scholarships, 170,000 scholarships in the first phase.
Wow.
150,000 of them are already taking those courses. These are 6-month, 3-month courses. And what we've done is, and that is the intervention that I can claim, that I moved it towards high skills, high-end skills, and not the normal skilling program that were there at the TEFTAs. So the TEFTAs will do the normal skilling program, and we are moving everything into the high-end skills, right, which immediately provide you with employment. So the first batch of 47,000 that qualified, 80% of them are already earning. 80% out of the first batch, we were trained. About 160 universities are involved, institutes are involved. So skills now, education now needs to be rethought at every level. Absolutely at every level. I've recently spoken to Dr. Amjad Saqib. We're going to do a pilot in 30 of his schools. He's got 300 schools. We need to start at primary level and move upwards, right? That's one critical element. The problem that we've had with EdTech, now I'll tell you, my experience with the LUMS entrepreneurship, every cohort, the number of EdTechs grew, right? So there were interventions by Ilm Ideas 2, there was encouragement, and the problem is so big that everybody sees an opportunity. But at the other end of it, the money available is very sparse, right? Hardly any interest lies in this area. Everybody wants to rush into the last mile. Everybody wants to go and fund, now digital retail. Education struggles, right? So the edtechs that came to education struggle. Now I've developed a model. We started in September. By February, we had raised $100,000, right, pre-seed to create content, right? And we are now in market. We are raising another $500,000. If you know how, you go to the right place and raise the money. Otherwise, it's very tough because everybody wants to see traction first. Everybody wants to know what your numbers are, how much revenue you're bringing in. Whereas, you have a last mile provider who doesn't have a single customer, doesn't have a single order, and gets $10 million, right? So that's the difference. Right? So in education, you are struggling because the government is the largest, let's say, number of students are in government schools. And those are shut doors, right? PEPRA rules, everything else. So EdTech hardly finds a space. The other thing is it's lifetime learning now. It's not about just teaching a bunch of kids, right? It's not about, even at till the age of 24, which is most likely when you're in university and you're out of there. It's lifetime, right? So lifetime learning is what we need to now think of when we think of EdTech. I mean, I tell everybody wherever I go, I said my only qualification is I never went to university. That's my only qualification. So I start from there. And it's interesting, I've had some webinars recently with the universities, outlying universities. I like outlying universities. I go to UVR Khan, I go to Namal Miawali, I go to UVAS in Chinyot, I go to FAST in Chinyot, because that is where I think hunger lies. That's where the real thing is.
Just asking you one question, before I move to the next panel, just a quick question on one of the comments. Pakistan is $16 billion industry with $5-7 billion still in potential, crossing $20 billion. That's the education industry in Pakistan. And historically, we have been, putting schools, brick and mortar, and, we like sending kids to our school. How much of this potential do you think can be transformed into EdTech out of the 20 billion, a rough proportion, in next 3 to 5 years? What do you think that potential in terms of revenue exists?
I would like to see 30% transforming, minimum, right? Because quite frankly, the way we teach our kids is absolutely outdated. It is terrible, even in the top schools. The sage on stage is dead. So we should bury the sage on stage. And, education has to be rethought. COVID has done one thing, it's forced low touch. It does not mean that you don't get, and people are trying to get their heads around it, how to do it, what tools to use. Not just get onto Zoom, but then you need other tools, to be able to deliver what you want to deliver. It has to be, I would like to see the next 5 years, 30% shift into education, in the sense, even right now, universities are doing what? Right? They're still charging the same fee and they're putting courses online. They're just using an LMS. They just put content on the LMS and say, oh, we've gone online. We've changed everything. They haven't. Right? All they've done is, the same material that would be delivered to you, right, in a classroom is now being delivered to you online, through an LMS. We need to go beyond that. None of these universities was actually ready. They had not prepared, and they were caught with their pants down. I mean, that's my thing. Even the top universities like LUMS. I remember having a conversation in March 2020, right, with one of our EdTechs, EdTech Works, Dr. Faraz. She asked me to join her in a meeting with the VC and his whole council. And they were just a shut door. They were not even willing to listen of what she was saying. And she was saying, you need to move education, a lot of your courses online. And, here is the platform. She's now going to the Central Asian University and she's delivering over there. I'm headed to the Central Asian University in about 2 weeks, right? Because I'm going to help them with their Center of Entrepreneurship. Right? And I've been engaged with them for the last 3 weeks. What I'm trying to say is there's a globalization of almost everything we do. If we develop the right technology, look at Khan Academy or look at Baiju. Forget Khan Academy. Let's look at Baiju. Baiju today is a decathon. Right? It's a decathon. And he started with brick and mortar. But he realized very, very quickly that he needed to go online. So 2015 onwards, right, he went online and he just galloped. Just the numbers are phenomenal, unbelievable. I know
And
this
just to
because
let you know, bio is $12 billion valuation right now.
that's why I said it's a decacorn, right? So it's not even a unicorn, it's a decacorn. And it's right next door. And it's simple stuff. I had to, with my co-founders, we studied the whole EdTech space for almost 2 years before we developed our product, right? And Bio was one of those companies that we studied backwards, forward, sideways, took as deeper dive as we could, what worked and what didn't work. So we need to look at that. And I'm saying 30% needs to shift, right? And because you can't solve the problem of a country like Pakistan, where education is a huge problem, but it's a huge opportunity without using technology. You will never be able to solve it. Brick and mortar,
Perfect,
even top line schools like TCF, right? I ask that question and say, what is going to happen once your kid does his metric or his O levels or her O levels? What's next? What percentage makes it to university? Less than 5%, right? So what's going to happen? You need to start skilling them at very early stage, very early age.
Amazing.
Right? So
thank you, Faisal, for some insightful comments and some, from the heart and doing it. And with that, I'm going to come to Misbah, and she's been a wonderful in terms of her experience from investments in fintech, from corporate finance background to recent investment in EdTech as well. So Misbah, thank you for joining the panel today. How would you, first of all, we've seen a lot of potential, like $20 billion industry in Pakistan. And with you, I think EDSCA, I2I Ventures have invested. How do you see the potential in growth in EdTech, and what is your advice to the people who are listening and the people who will watch this video, that what is the core focus they should have? Again, I come back to Faisal's point that the hold of the VCs on these universities and these brick and mortar schools and big universities, and only 5% of students going to the universities after metric. To see EdTech can play that revolution in Pakistan.
Sure. Thanks, Zeshan. It's great to be here and amongst all of these other accomplished speakers. So I think, like you said, yes, at I2I Ventures, we have invested in an EdTech in Pakistan at CASA. Fahad was on one of the panels yesterday as well as part of this forum. And there was a good discussion going on there from an actual operator perspective, somebody who's on the ground and building. I think a couple of points I'd like to make, picking up on both what Faisal and Faraz also said. The opportunity in Pakistan is huge. I don't necessarily agree that there isn't money there. There is money. I do agree with Faisal's point that it's competitive because there's a lot of very fast growing models in certain areas which are picking up a lot of speed, whether it's B2B Karyana store retail, or whether it's maybe looking at last mile, etc. So it is a competitive market. But having said that, I think we all recognize the opportunity to change things around education in Pakistan. And I think what is important is to look at several different aspects. So if you look at the different verticals where EdTech operates potentially, Faraz mentioned universities, that's a whole other ballgame to tackle in terms of what are the requirements, where are the gaps, how do you get to them, who are your customers if you are an EdTech and you're focusing on university students. Whereas primary, secondary, so you have a lot of good models in Pakistan that are focusing on, let's say, primary schooling. So you have, Talimabad that is looking at supplementing schooling in Pakistan. You have opportunities like, Dot and Line, which is doing after-school tuitions through tuition centers, etc. What EdCasa is doing and why we invested in them is that because they're focusing specifically on exam prep. And for us, the focus is important, right? So I think there's a lot of opportunities in EdTech in Pakistan, but even from an investor perspective, what we would like to look for is founders that are focused on solving one aspect of the problem. I don't think you can walk in and expect that you're going to solve all the problems for everybody across the board in Pakistan. And I'm giving the example of EdCasa because that's an investment we have made, but also to your point, Zeshan, that what are the kinds of things that will excite VC investors? So I think it's important to understand from a startup perspective, where you lie in the whole value chain, right? What is your USP and which is the area that you're operating in? If you're early stage and you're looking at partnering with schools in a way that is expecting the schools to pay, I think the challenge that you'll come across is that either schools will not have budget for it, especially like Faisal said, government schools are severely underfunded. or it may not be a priority. They may not see the opportunity, and that's something that you're sort of pushing up against. For startups like that, I would say go for opportunities like grants if you have them. If you have an opportunity to get money, we just had a few GSMA grants given to Pakistan. I think Karimabad is one of them as well, if I'm not mistaken. So the opportunity is there to get grant funding if you are in a business model that cannot be sustainable right at the beginning, and use that to then get to the point where you're building for the future. Something like EdCasa is sustainable from day one because they focus very specifically on exam prep. They're looking at K to 12. They're looking at preparation for board exams across Pakistan. They focused a lot on content. So they've really understood, they've been working with these students for the last couple of years through YouTube, through Facebook, through other activities that they've been doing, and they've been engaging with them. So they really understand their target market, and they really understand how are those students thinking, how is it a priority for them and their parents, what are they thinking about in terms of exams, how is exam prep happening right now, what is happening in after school tuitions in that segment, and then building the business model, keeping all of these things in mind. So again, using that as an example, I would say to people that are either aspiring to get into EdTech or are aspiring to raise funding for EdTech, see where your model falls in this huge universe of what EdTech could be. And then approach people accordingly. So we already know of several regional players that have launched in Pakistan after having raised significant amounts of funding in the region, in MENA. We know of EdTechs in Pakistan that are raising right now. EdCasa itself is, closed a round recently and is gearing up for their next round because they're growing so fast. Fahad mentioned yesterday they've already hit over 100,000 subscribers in less than 2 months. So with that kind of growth, of course, investors will be excited. They will be excited because you know the size of the opportunity. If you have a good founding team, and if your approach and your business model is focused and has very specific milestones about where you want to get and how you want to get there, investors will be interested and they will be excited. One thing I will say in terms of COVID, Zeshan, just to a point that you had said in the introduction really quickly, is that COVID has been terrible for the world, but in some ways in Pakistan, there is this positive aspect where tech adoption has sped up. So people have become more comfortable with technology. They've become more comfortable doing things on their phones. And that goes to EdTech as well. Students, unfortunately, were forced to get online. It was like, I agree with Faisal completely. It's not the best of, it was not seamless. People are just saying, okay, whatever content we have in person, let's just put it online and expect that everybody will sort of react like they should. And that doesn't happen that way. The engagement needs to be very different. But having said that, I think what we are seeing is a broader tech adoption. And I think that's positive because increasingly we'll see people getting comfortable doing things on their phones in their private lives and outside of school, they already are. But I think this engaging with learning opportunities online is actually going to continue to increase. And of course, we have opportunities to become like a Byju's or others in the space that are similar in terms of having gotten there from a valuation and a funding perspective.
Wonderful, Misbah. Thank you. And you rightly said, other panelists, that we have an absolute amazing potential to become Byju's. But what are we doing to crack that code? What are we doing to achieve? And there are a lot of struggles that we have to go through and learn, unlearn, code, decode. And that is the process of learning that Pakistan is going through. And it's good to see many startups coming up, even they're failing and learning and all. And, Salman has been waiting for a long time. Sorry, Salman, in the panelists, it's always been the last, but someone has to now pick the cherries off the trees. So with your experience, Salman, looking at your profile with all the experience, just to modify the question a little bit and throw you a different ball, Pakistan, COVID has been a blessing in a different way in terms of us adopting the technology, you and I connected in a Zoom. But I'll give you some stats. I work in 103 cities of Pakistan, and the huge big challenge that we have that in Pakistan, 70% of Pakistan is rural population. And in these rural areas, including GB, far-flung Fata, interior Sindh, South Punjab, so Pakistan is not you and I talking on Zoom here. I'm sure this live session is hardly seen in the 70% of Pakistan right now. How do you see EdTech? Because when you talk about technology and talk about Tira Valley or Bajor or Ranipur or Thar or Kumbh or Kashmir or Neelam Valley, they do not have access to technology there. Students do not even have laptops. Forget about Wi-Fi and the 4G network. There's hardly, edge. We're back in Stone Age. So with all this potential, we will again, put all the potential back to these, bigger cities focus. While potential is 70% of Pakistan, which is right there. How do you see that shift changing? Do you think government is doing something? How do we address that problem or give solutions so that, the EdTech in Pakistan does grow to a unicorn and does grow to a bigger platform? Otherwise, I'm sorry to say, होता ही है कि when we sit on various forums, एक बच्चा कहता है जी मैं मॉडल चाहूँ लाहौर में बिरयानी बेच रहा हूँ DHA में बिरयानी बेचूंगा, that is my startup. That's fine, and that's the potential that he can start, but he doesn't have the vision and the scalability. How do we grow that potential and reach that $20 billion figure in 5 years?
Assalamu alaikum, Zeshan. Thank you for having me here in an amazing panelists, and thank you for the viewers. I hope they get enlightenment from all our discussion. First of all, yes, I'll be picking up cherries, but my approach is completely unorthodox. As it's been in the past, I do not follow the conventional methods, and I always look forward, not watching the news in present days. Since the COVID lockdown hit last year, everybody did get a shock because everybody was busy in their routine, getting their problems, resolved or getting their jobs, tasks done and everything else. So I take this problem as, I would put it in a layman's term, just imagine a human being. So once the lockdown came in, everybody started making models. Somebody's making a finger, somebody's making a hand, an arm, and everything else. So it's not becoming a cohort. There are modules which are being developed in remote areas, but nobody's connecting the modules or bringing a confluence of technology in the field. So my approach was totally different to grab this problem by the horns. I started developing the skeleton on which the modules will work. So what we need is not just a revolution from informative education to a transformative education, where every subject is taught as one. A problem is addressed by mathematics, by science, by biology, physics, or whatever it needs as one. That gives the new generation a mindset of not becoming a job product from a university when they graduate. They become businessmen, which, like you said, biryani wala selling biryani and scaling up. So that's just one person thinking of himself, how to earn more. When you become an entrepreneur, you go beyond that and you start thinking about, the people around you and how to improve their lives. So right now, what Pakistan needs is entrepreneurs, a lot of them, and disruptors. So we need to change the existing models. What I see is everything needs to become open source. If it is not open source, EdTech is not going to kick off properly. So for that, the open source programs need to be incoherent with the knowledge base, the libraries, the digitization of them. Everybody is going to eventually have a cell phone in their hands. Most of them do. Companies like Starlink are setting a base in Pakistan. Data centers, desktop as a service is coming up on clouds. So these are all the models that eventually connect the EdTech and bring in the required interest of international market or grants or funds or whatever it is. But saying that, besides all of this, the alliance and strategic alliance of colleges and the government is very much necessary. For example, last year, I had made an alliance with a university with over 600 students in Karachi. And we brought in MIT Tech Lab. It's a fabrication lab, which is a cloud shared resource. And what our plan was, rather to get in this thing running, we have made a framework to go to the industry, get the dead machinery, which they have kept aside for scrap, get them to donate those in the technology of MIT Fab Lab, and we educate and we reverse engineer those machines to educate the students and provide the industry, eliminating the gap of demand and supply between the industry and what the education institutes supply. So these are the things that eventually become one and provide the necessary steps to move forward. EdTech is the only way to go forward. And I believe, like Mr. Faisal has taken those big steps, those are very good. And to bring those cash in, one has to have a concrete framework in place to have all those modules sit together with the government interference, with the government collaboration, and then you can get all the grants you want. So the topic as it was, how to get cash for EdTech in the country. There's a lot of investment coming. So people who are looking for payoffs and people who are looking for numbers, those people are the industrialists or whatever their backgrounds were. They have the money, but the vision and the mission is not clear to them. So everybody has the spare money. They don't know what to do with it. So they just buy off startups. Many of them fail because they don't have a clear vision, the clear strategy, the clear PR. So cash doesn't always give you the advantage. You have to know where you need to go, and then you have to reverse engineer that to the hour. Once you start doing that, there's no way you won't hit your target. So I believe it has to be a coherent work between all the modules to make the whole umbrella of EdTech work efficiently and accelerate in Pakistan. I think I've covered most of that.
Wonderful, Salman. Thank you so much. And in the interest of time, because there's only this is a topic very close to my heart, and I'm sure looking at the answers from all of you, this seems very exciting. Unfortunately, we only have 30 minutes left. So rather than asking one question to everyone, I'm going to throw like multiple questions in all of you. So starting back again, Faraz, one of the important questions is, again, when we talk about EdTech, what I've heard from all of you, it has huge potential in Pakistan. Investors are looking to invest. Some foreign investments are coming in. My question again, I want to change the mindset of the people that are there who are trying to start in EdTech. Why do focus Pakistan only? Because technology goes beyond border. Today we are doing Zoom, and Zoom is not in Pakistan only. So if an EdTech in Pakistan tap the market in South Asia and Africa, which is 32% children out of school, and the market in Canada and the market in North Africa and US, why can't we think global? My question is, when we talk about everything, and all of us talked about, Salman is raising the hand, I'll come to you, Salman, that we have too much focus in Pakistan, ki ji, hamara product, hamari kahani, hamari population, and we forget that to become a unicorn and to go global, we have to think that potential. And we sometimes, like Faisal said and Misbah said, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We have a lot of examples that are happening. Kareem came and Uber came, and then Grab came, and almost all the similar apps. Now everyone is a unicorn. So Salman, coming back to you, because you raised the hand, so I wanted to pick your brain on what you wanted to say on globalization.
I'm very much against solicitation, so pardon me on that, but I need to give you a bit of the information. So as I said, I started building the skeleton where the modules will fit in, launched 14 companies in 7 months. 5 of them are global, and I agree with you, the moment the corona hit, the borders were finished. So we are bringing academia from European countries, which are number 2 in the world, to Pakistan, online, without any big income involved, and it will be a subscription model for anybody. So providing that with the DAS solution from a data center on the fiber optic lines, anybody and everybody remotely can come online from the cheapest hardware they have, without any, just all they need is a good internet. They can come online and they can access any knowledge base provided on a subscription model, which is cheap. Everybody can afford it. And it has to be a subscription model for the survivability and sustainability of whoever's running the whole system. So the books need to be digitized, the libraries need to be digitized, the academia needs to be across border, exchange programs, languages. We should send our local academia abroad. A few years back, we developed books and characters from the heritage and legacy of Sindh. Why do we need to see Disney all the time? Why cannot we, outsource our legacy abroad? So there are a lot of things people need to know, because the image of the country needs to come up and go global, just because there are no boundaries left. That's all I wanted to add.
Thank you, Salman. Coming back to you, Faraz, because after image ki baat ki, Salman, I'm gonna ask a very critical question with Faisal. But before I wanted to go back to Faraz and talk about globalization and the issues in Pakistan with the scalability. So Faraz, quick 1 minute. Faraz, you're muted. Faraz, your mic is muted.
Salman has actually explained that quite well. I personally think the startups we've invested in and the general startup ecosystem, everyone do think global. I mean, there are very few startups that I've come across that think global. They have seen global models, they've pivoted, they've created their own models, and then there are bridges actually through VCs and investors that are being created. So we have got two arms at Seed. We've got an ecosystem arm and we have got an investment arm. And we have not invested in any EdTech startup as of yet, but we run Pakistan's largest school enterprise program for the past 5 years. And it's from Khuzdar to Gilgit-Baltistan and the areas that you were talking about, where there is no electricity, there is no internet, and it used to be delivered face-to-face. So physically, our mentors and our teams used to go to the school, engage the principals, and then link them through a game model and deliver that program. Came COVID, and we was like, it's one of the largest programs, 140 schools engaged regularly, 20,000 kids, what are we gonna do? Yeah. And we said, okay, let's go digital. And I tell you something, that our cost of delivery went significantly up, simply because we didn't know how to do it. So if the cost was, let's say, in single digits, it went in triple digits, okay? And simply because of mismanagement. But we've realized that if we do it in a collaborative manner, with the telcos available, with the internet service providers available, and some startups as well that are available in Pakistan, we definitely can bring back the cost down even to a minuscule level. So I think Pakistan has the potential. Pakistanis startups definitely do not think just local, but it's critical to create delivery mechanisms to people who do not have access to education and far-flung areas. I think that is a model that definitely, when it comes into space, would really to revolutionize the country.
Wonderful, Faraz. Thank you. And I'm going to go back to Misbah. Misbah, you wanted to say something as well, to add to this topic. You sent a comment, so we'd like to hear from you a quick 1 minute. So then we can ask. I want to throw at you in the end. So a quick 1 minute, Misbah.
Sure. Thanks, Zeshan. On this topic of globalization, just to agree with Salman and Faraz and add one point there, I think it's very important. And again, to what Faisal said earlier, study the models that have worked outside the country. Like, he was saying they studied Byju's. Look at what's worked. Adopt those for Pakistan where you think there's an opportunity to do that. You don't have to start from scratch. But also keep in mind that your local culture, your local environment, your local technology and barriers there all play into this. And so just don't assume that you can plug and play from some other market into Pakistan. So I think from a global mindset perspective, definitely learn from what's happening globally. From an application perspective, I'll agree with Faraz. I can give the example of EdCasa and others that we've seen. They are thinking global. They are thinking regional. But the market in Pakistan is so big that you have to start from home. And the opportunity there is that you don't have to, maybe when you get to like 20-30% of the market, then you can start looking outside. But you don't have to start being all over the place right from the beginning. So get your product right, get your traction going, focus on Pakistan, huge opportunity. Otherwise, a year later, we'll be at this forum again saying, "Kisi ne kuch kiya nahi Pakistan mein because sab bahar dekh."
Yeah, that's true.
So build here. The market here is huge. It's a big opportunity, but also keep your eye, build so that you can expand regionally and globally. There's a lot of opportunity. I mean, even with EdCasa, we're already seeing adoption because there are Pakistanis outside Pakistan that are interested in board exams. So they're already using the app, even though they're not based in Pakistan, to use it for exam prep. And where, when these guys were on YouTube, they had organic users from India. because the board curriculum was very similar. So we've already seen opportunities there which we can leverage. But I think the question is, what's the right time for you to start looking out from an expansion perspective? And I would say that first focus on the problem at hand, get started on it, get some traction, and then of course, inshallah, the world is your oyster, and we want to see much more coming out of Pakistan in terms of global companies. So
wonderful, Misbah. That's a very enlightening point. I mean, I think the people who are listening will benefit a lot in terms of the current potential of the scale that you have in-house first, and tap that and then globally. And just to add to your point, Misbah, Pakistan, if you look around, if you just move back not much, like 10, 15 years ago, and fast forward 10, 15, there are a lot of big private universities who are now billion-rupee companies and school system that has come up. Go back to Faisal. And I'll throw you a different question, Faisal. Education, again, is close to everyone's heart. Because I want to tell audience what is the potential out there. One of the problems that EdTech can solve, which I think in Pakistan is a massive problem, is girls' education. We normally do not send our daughters to school. And when we talk about the masses, the percentage of daughters and young girls going to school in rural in Pakistan, except for the bigger cities, is less than 20 or 30%. And EdTech can resolve this problem with girls sitting at home, getting the best education and the best college, the best university. So Faisal, what do you think that how can EdTech solve Pakistan's problem in terms of this cultural dilemma where we say that daughters, and I've been to rural areas, बच्चियों को school भेजना, बेटियों को नहीं पढ़ाना. So there have a lot of been campaigns been done. How EdTech can support that? I just wanted to ask you that with your experience in LUMS and everything else.
It's very simple. I think SERP has done a very large longitudinal study, 20 years plus. And the interesting outcome of that, this is from Dr. Taran himself, is that the only bias is ability bias. There is an ability bias. If my daughter is sharp and smart and intelligent, I will break everything to get her into a school. Because I'm looking at my future, I'm looking at my budhapa also. And I know in my mind that my daughter will probably be the one who will take care of me. That said, the biggest problem, the actual real problem is infrastructure and how close it is to home. For her to get to school is a difficult thing, right? So the problem lies there, right? The ability, the mobility, how does she get to school? Does her father take her? How does she get to school? A boy can walk. A boy can ride a cycle, right? They can do a number of things. So that's one thing. And yes, EdTech definitely solves that problem, right? So we have to look at it from that lens and say access. The question is of access. The question is not so much of bias. I was involved with a very large program in 2012, right, which was funded by DFID. And the purpose of that program was to get political parties to put education on their manifestos and increase the spend on education. Right? I was part of the young group and I was leading the digital side of the group. So my interaction with parents, with teachers in the remotest areas, and I still remember one teacher from deep interior Sindh, right? How negative he was initially, and then how it turned around because we engaged with them. Engagement is very, very necessary. Parents know that they need to educate their daughters. The entire program started with alims talking about the need of education, right? Prophet's wife, Bibi Hafsa, was one of the most educated people in her community. So, these problems can be addressed. The real problem is access. And yes, education technology changes that. I'll also share another anecdote with you. In 2012, we had a product, Young Group had a product which is called SMS All, right? It was developed by another group of people, but we were using that. And at that time, you didn't have smartphones to this degree. You didn't have very large number of smartphones. At best, you had a feature phone, right? And most people had a little feature phone. The veritable Teti Das, right? That never died. So, that kind of market was there. And there was a teacher, an English teacher, right? He came to us because the platform was an SMS social platform. You could get a lot of people onto it at one time. He had 28,000 students across Pakistan that he was teaching English using SMS.
Wow.
Right? By the time we were done with him in 2 years, he had 170,000 students across Pakistan using SMS.
Get his number, Faisal. I want to get his number and I want to speak to him.
To teach them English, right? So we have to understand one thing. We're not going to change things in the normal way. We have to disrupt. My whole thesis, which I go around and I say it without any fear, because I'm not looking for popularity. I'm looking to do things. Schools are not going to do it. You need to disrupt the schools. Simple
How
as
to
that.
disrupt the education mafia, Faisal? The education mafia, the education dons, like, you know.
Yeah, I'll tell you how, right? You have to think outside of them, right? The platform, the product we've developed, we never factored a school in from day one. We said we're going to go directly to parents and directly to their children. Direct.
Okay.
If I had started to walk down the school, Misbah knows Ed Kasa's struggles, right? Ed Kasa was incubated with us at LUMS, right? We know how much struggle they went through. They got lucky that they had visibility because of being at LCE, and Ilm Ideas was involved with us at that time, right? So they got their first little grant from Ilm Ideas too. Otherwise, they would have died. They would have just walked away and done something else. Fahad is from
I want to pause you here with this question. This is a very important point that you have raised. I want to, because in the interest of time, because, you know, at CASA, you said had extreme potential, talented and all this, but they had this visibility and they had this opportunity at the right time. There may be someone sitting right there in some other city as well. How to actually get them the visibility? How to actually get, you know, Misbah to invest in them? How to get Faraz and Salman to identify them, because they do not have LUMS at their support. They do not have Faisal as their mentor. They do not have access to Misbah. They do not have access to, and there's extreme potential sitting out there somewhere in Kamuki. So Salman, or Zeshan, I want to, Salman, if you can quickly address this as well.
As I said, I don't like to solicit, but this is exactly how we started by opening the Pakistan's first tier 3 data center, having a majority fiber optic system in Pakistan, and then providing DAS, desktop, as a solution to those who cannot afford a computer at all. So that's what I was saying. Go on the internet, come on the DAS, and we give you the power to do anything for free.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you, Salman.
So once you give the generation the tools, we have to understand money is a tool. It's not something we should hoard and sit upon and then race. It's a tool to make better tools. Share your tools with the new generation, you get more innovation, and that's how they grow. So if you provide them the platform to work on, they will get the visibility by proving themselves. Visibility is everything.
Great, Salman, I'm glad people like you and people like the forum that are here think that way. So I'm going to go back to Faraz and Misbah, both of you. The question I want to ask, because last 10 minutes left. One thing, I'm sure the private sector is doing a lot. I'm sure we all have to take that first step. But at the same time, with the government's vision to improve, the education system, do you think the government is doing enough? The education ministries are doing enough? The provincial ministries who are there in education, do you think they're supporting the technology side of it? What is your one advice, Faraz and Misbah, anyone of you can start first, to the government and the officials who may listen to this? What steps they should take to promote this culture again? Salman has raised his hand, but I'm going to go back to Faraz and Misbah and come back to Salman. So Faraz, what do you think? What is your one advice to government and education? Because after the 18th Amendment, education has become a provincial subject. Sabne apna wo bana li jagir, right? The federal has a limited, the one curriculum is coming. What is your provincial ministers, if they're listening, what would you advise them to actually help tap this 20 billion industry in Pakistan?
Put in the right people who understand the space, and don't make advisory boards of 15 people who are really just going to meet. I mean, they're good people. I'm not saying they're not good people, and they're competent people, but take away the red tape. If the provincial ministers understand the space, there is money available. There is different kind of alternative finance available in Pakistan even now. And just a very quick one, private sector is not doing enough. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah,
private sector
that I agree with
really,
you. Yeah.
I mean, there are institutions that are doing a reasonable job on their supply and distribution communities through their CSRs. But my biggest grouse is with the commercial banks and majority of the banks, because I was an ex-banker. And I mean, for God's sake, okay, you need to actually, not through the Kamyab Jawan programs or the government's funding mechanisms, you need to actually create products and services that actually support a business plan that actually is new economy, not the conventional brick and mortar, not exactly like yaar cement ki factory lagani hai to phir sugar की फैक्ट्री लगानी है. न्यू इकोनॉमी बिजनेस की लेंडिंग का कॉन्सेप्ट पाकिस्तान में है ही नहीं कमर्शियल बैंकिंग साइड पे. They're not even equipped to actually do a feasibility, for God's sake. And अगर आप किसी भी दुनिया की top environment में देखें, the commercial banks, okay, SME banks, they actually create that ecosystem of finance. I mean, ours is absolutely dominant. I say it on their faces, be it State Bank and be it the commercial bank CEOs and senior leadership. Sorry, it's a very personal topic.
I agree with you. Just to give you one example before I jump into Misbah, you need a CEO running a bank which is $1 billion bank, and you're looking for a CEO, and there is the amazing top surgeon who is a surgeon in Pakistan who has done 1 million surgeries. You would never put that expert to head a bank. So we need the right people at the right place. No matter how good it is in his profession, we need at least someone to understand that as well. And Misbah, with the same question, but just to add a little more point towards the government involvement and the private sector. And let me just play a devil's advocate for a while. Let me be the devil's advocate for the private sector. Why should I invest? Why? I am in a business of making money. I'm in a business of putting a sugar mill. I'm in a business of putting a textile unit. I'm in a business of putting, Salman has raised his hand again. I'll come to you, Salman. But Faraz said that SME sector should do this economy. Why should I? The banks are run by states and the shareholders who want to do more lending and more deposits and run their businesses. Why should I invest? Why should private sector take a step? So I'm going to take Misbah first, then go back to Salman and Faraz and share. Misbah.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with Faraz. Unfortunately, I also have a very dim view of banks, and that's why I used to be a banker at the beginning of my career, and I finally saw the light. But on a serious note, I think there is a lot of opportunity from a commercial perspective. There's no reason from a commercial perspective that people should not be funding opportunities in education and EdTech. I'll come back again to the business model, execution, operation. You can have a vision and you can say these X million people are without this service and I'm going to provide it to them. But if you don't show me a plan and if you're not focused on execution, and to Faisal's point about EdCasa being in ILM Ideas, and then they were in the Spring Accelerator, and obviously they were at LUMS before that, they were also in the I2I Accelerator. All of that helped them hone down on their business model and get really good at execution and figuring out what it is that they need to see. If you're able to show me that as an investor, I'm going to put money in the company. If you show that to other private investors in Pakistan, they will back it. We know what the size of the problem is, but what we need to see is solutions that work and focus on execution and building. And of course, everything else will come. The valuation conversation will happen. There will be excitement and interest from regional players looking to invest. Local people will say, "Ye kar rahe hain, to hum kyun nahi kar sakte?" Sometimes it takes somebody who's seen a model in another market to come in and say, "Oh, great, I've invested in Byju's. I know how great this is. I'm also going to invest in EdCasa because I believe that this model really works." Once that is done, in the next round, you'll have 5 different states wanting to say, "Chalo ji, mujhe bhi invest karna hai isme," because regional players have come in. So sometimes, there's all of these things in the ecosystem that need to happen to come together. To your point about government, I think there are 2 things. One, government needs to play an overall enabling role. I think from the investment side, we're definitely starting to see that, both State Bank and SECP. I've been on all these subcommittees working with them on actually helping change laws. We've seen that happen at a macro level in terms of bringing investment in. Now, when that is changed, then obviously that will also impact the EdTech sector and investment coming into EdTech. At a local level,
do you think the government is doing enough?
I think the government, I think the government should be doing more, but I agree with Faraz that the private sector also should not have the private sector off the hook and just any sab kuch government nahi karna hai. The government has tons of problems, and I think because education is a provincial matter, what we're seeing is very different approaches in different provinces. So we're seeing some are effective and some are not effective. We're seeing some that are focused, and like, I think in KP, there's been a really good initiative around education. And I've been in certain places where I've seen schools which are, there could be a school in Lahore or Islamabad or Karachi. You cannot tell. The infrastructure is good, the teachers are experienced and trained, etc. So, and yet there are schools in Sindh which are dilapidated, falling apart, not really focused on. So I think there is more that the government can do. I think on a macro level, it is starting to, it's a priority for sure, especially with this government. But I do think we need to move away from those thousands of committees and advisors, like Faraz said, and really get down to who are the people that have the experience and the expertise, who knows what they're talking about, where can we learn from other markets, and then implement. And sometimes the grander the plan, the more it's talk. Just get down and start executing.
Wonderful, Misbah. Wonderful.
Startup and a government perspective.
Thank you, Misbah, for some insightful comments. And just to add to one thing, in my early childhood, still, like abhi tak, I'm scared of ghosts. Like I'm really scared of ghosts. I hope I don't see one. But why I said this is because I read a report in Sindh that said 70% of teachers are ghost teachers. I was like, how can a teacher be ghost? And then I wanted to read the definition, and then I realized it never exists. I was like, I'll go to that school which has ghost teachers, right? So EdTech will solve that problem as well. So like Faisal said, we are fighting a war, and that war is against the education mafia and the education cartel, which doesn't want EdTech to succeed as well. And I like Salman raising hands. Salman, high five, because you and I think like to speak much. So Salman, getting back to you, मेरे last में एक बड़ा important question है, because our time is 2 minutes left, which I want कि आपके जाने से पहले आप लोगों को कोई फायदा नहीं, आप लोगों को इस पैनल का आज कोई फायदा नहीं होगा, because if they cannot answer the last question. So before I do ask that, Salman, over to you.
Yes, उससे पहले आपने एक सवाल पूछा था कि मैं क्यों पैसे लगाऊं. जब आपकी जेब में पैसे होंगे तो मैं आपको सेट कैटेगरी में फॉल कराऊंगा. इस सवाल के साथ. My demeanor is different than Misbah's. So I would like to tell those people जो कहते हैं कि मैं क्यों लगाऊं. तो सर, हमारे आगे की जनरेशन, अगर हम अपने मुल्क के बच्चों को सपोर्ट ना दें तो अगली जनरेशन को ब्रेन्स नहीं मिलेंगे काम करने.
Wonderful, Salman. What a beautiful reply. You have won my heart.
I would add to that. So again, connecting that to what Misbah said, the pilot, the ecosystem, the vision, the mission has to be very focused, and you have to be consistent. So I have been working 18 to 20 hours for 7 days a week since past 2 years. So
this is a big answer to all these people who said 20 hours work at this age. Looking at Salman's white hair, he still works 20 hours a day. So Salman, if Zoom allowed me an emoji, I would send you a heart emoji right now for the comment that you made.
It's necessary because my demeanor again is when the world is sleeping, I must be running. That's the best time.
Wonderful.
And while
Salman, there's a question for you.
Why can't we find a new cow?
Okay, Salman, so if you can type, one of the participants from Kashmir, Munazza Yaqub, has asked a question that she would like to have a link of your organization and the 14 companies that you mentioned, and because she's doing some education tech. So if you can type that in the comment. So coming back to the last question, and
quickly, on my link, and I'll just paste I'll do that.
Wonderful. Because we have just like, we have run over time, but I want to end it at this note that thank you everyone for some wonderful, insightful sessions. My request to CXO is give us more time, because this is next time, give us a little more time so we can ask more questions. Before we end, the question I wanted to ask is that Faraz, Faisal, Misbah, Salman, and Zeshan, you are useless. You are nothing for the audience unless before you go from this panel today, you give that one last advice, what to do in EdTech. If someone is there, someone is excited, someone is passionate, after Faisal saying $20 billion, Misbah saying, I can invest, Faraz saying, and I can support for the globalization, Salman saying, yes, work 20 hours, we are here standing for you. What is that one thing that focus on in EdTech? Starting with Faraz again, we'll go Faraz, Faisal, Misbah, and Salman, and end it that way. Faraz, just like 30 seconds, one advice.
We want to grow, let's become a $1 billion company with 1 million consumers. Make sure your first 20 are really, really, really happy with what you're delivering.
Wonderful. Faisal, over to you.
You need to disrupt, you need to rethink education. You shouldn't be doing anything just to pass an exam. You should be acquiring knowledge. You should be applying knowledge. That is what EdTechs need to do. They need to walk down that path.
Wonderful. Misbah.
I think I'll go back to something I said earlier. Focus, focus, and execute. Start small, focus, execute, and build from there.
Wonderful. Salman.
A good plan with the relevant people, the PR, and we'll do the support. We all collectively have that ecosystem working here.
Wonderful, Salman. My last
YouTube idea.
Wonderful.
That's
My last comment is, I'm going to quote NASA before I end. And there's a picture of a bee in NASA which says, a bee doesn't know it has small wings. A bee doesn't know it cannot fly, because aerodynamics principle and the physics of philosophy and the passion and everything let bee know that it cannot fly. It still flips and fly because the wings are so small. Do not matter. Let your, forget about what you can do. Keep trying and keep doing your best. The mentors are here. You will find the right people. Pakistan has a lot of potential. Pakistan has a lot of amazing, beautiful mentors and investors at the panel like here. We will guide you and we'll tell you what to do next. You have to take the first step. You have to step up. You have to start that first process. We'll hold your hand. With that note, thank you everyone. Faraz, it was great seeing you. I keep seeing you on LinkedIn. Misbah, thank you for being here with us. Faisal, long time. I think once I'm back to Lahore, we should catch up. It's been a long time since I saw your water cooler, that experiment, and that guy has done really wonders under your mentorship. Salman, good seeing you as well. I keep speaking about you, but good hearing you as well. And thank you, CXO Global Forum, Tufail, the whole team, and Anza for doing some amazing work with EdTech Summit. I hope people learn from this and we are able to contribute.
Thank you very much to all the esteemed panels, and thank you, Zeshan, for being an amazing moderator. It's been an enlightening discussion. We, literally got hundreds of comments online, and we would love to connect and disseminate more knowledge with all of you individually on the forum. Thank you very much for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We're going to be doing another very interesting discussion, a case study of, immigrating from 2G to 4G models. Stay tuned on how we can do this. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Anza.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye, guys.